think it's only fair that if we spend this much time together, because we're going to be here all week together, that you get to know a little bit about me, about why I do stuff like this. So when I was 18, I grew up on a farm and a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Like some people say that's true, but when I took my now wife, my fiance, to go visit my parents for the first time, honest to goodness, as we're driving out to my home, she said, "Hey, are we lost?" I was like, "What?" Because it's 15 miles from the nearest town to get to where I grew up. Where I lived on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, 2 miles from my nearest neighbor. And when I became a Christ follower, I didn't know what to do, and I kind of got on this pathway. And so here's just a quick snapshot. I went to Ozark Christian College, and I didn't know what to do, but I got involved in different ministries. And I realized that sharing the gospel with people, not just in preaching or teaching, because I wasn't very good at that at first, just being honest. And then as I grew older, I realized that what I wanted to do was go to the places where no one had ever heard before. And so I started off trying to be a missionary. I ended up being a youth pastor, and I worked for a long time with Jason French and Nate Carnes and Amarillo. He really is one of my very best friends. I love him. And as we got more and more serious about this calling on our lives, we went to Mexico City to be missionaries. My wife got super sick. Turns out she has a terrible autoimmune problem called systemic lupus. And as we moved back to the States, I got an opportunity to teach. During that time as a professor, one of the things that happened is that my daughter also got sick, and she has a terrible autoimmune problem called vasculitis pan. And it's further complicated that she has a blood clotting disorder called MTHFR. And so my girls spend a lot of time with the doctor. I also have a son who's 20 years old who's studying to be a missionary pilot. He's the coolest guy ever. In fact, he just recently told a girl the L word. That's pretty exciting for a guy like me because she's awesome. And I'm like, look, you're never going to do better than her, right? And I'm trying to be the cool dad, but I'm tempted to be like, lock it down, put a ring on that. But I'm being like, okay, it's too early. Be chill, Dad. What I do now is, as a missions pastor, as a leadership coach, I'm trying to help a whole younger generation of young people at our church that are pastors learn the skills and the tasks of what it means to lead at a church, and also to direct the outreach efforts. We have missionaries all over the world. It's really fun. I've been married to my wife for 26 years. We've had a lot of ups and downs and adventures, but that kind of gives you a little bit of snapshot of who I am and what I really care about. As I've studied, as I have led, as I have been involved in different ministries, here's the thing that I am convinced of more than anything in my life, that there is not a chance this world's going to get better without Jesus. I've seen some dark places, and I've lived in some dark places. Darker than you think and scarier than you think. But when the light of Christ comes in and transforms people, he changes the whole world. And so one of the things I love about CIY, the fact that you showed up, you took a week out of your summer, you came to move, and you are here on your own, on purpose. I give you great admiration and praise for that. Good job. Way to be here. And I'm excited to talk about our theme. Today we're talking about light and darkness, and that's a big, big deal. Now, I'm so thankful that I have kids. My wife and I found out early that it would be really tough for us to have kids. And so the fact that we have two is kind of a miracle. And so I'm one of those parents that I love being around my kids. I do. And every stage has been more fun than the last. And one of the things that's really been fun about my kids is from the very, very beginning, they like my sense of humor more than their mom's. It's awesome because my wife is like really sweet. Like some people are sweet on the outside and they're kind of mean on the inside. My wife is genuinely, honestly sweet, which I don't understand because I'm not. I like making people scared. I like, and my kids love to scare me. They do. Even when they were little, they would come out of the closet and be like, blah, and I'd be like, I'd act like it. I was like, oh, you got me. And they would laugh and throw themselves on the ground, and I would laugh. It was super fun. But it was during the daytime. And as they got older, they got more clever. My son in particular, he's real quiet and really sneaky and super patient. And so one day, what he did, no lie, he snuck under the closet where all the hanging clothes are, right? Because he knew that as I was going to work, I had to put on a nice shirt, being a professor, I would have to look for my shirts. And as I was going through my shirts, he comes out of the clothes and he's like, blah! And I was like, oh my gosh, good one. And instead of being like, son, how could you? I was like, I'm so proud of you. Shannon's crying. Why did I raise such bad children? It was great. But it means I get to scare him back. Well, so, I got to be careful because I'm meaner than they are. So I got to be like, okay, don't ruin your own children. That's okay, all right, for the game. But it was all fun and games, right? Until darkness gets involved, right? When things get dark, it's not quite as enjoyable as when it's light out. Darkness has this kind of, eerie quality to it. And you realize that your ability to see threats diminishes. And your mind starts creating all kinds of other difficulties, right? We turned it into a whole new game where we said, all right, instead of just scaring each other, we're going to play a game called Sardines. Now, do you know how that goes? Okay, if you don't, Sardines is like reverse hide and seek. One person goes and hides. Everybody else tries to go and hide from everybody else and find them. And just the last person, who doesn't get found is, the loser. Ha, 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 you're a loser. I'm just kidding. And so we love sardines. And the problem is my kids are really good at sardines, too. My wife hates it when we play sardines because they have mercy on her most of the time until we play sardines. My son one time, again, he's really good at stuff like this. He gets in the closet where our washer and dryer were. He laid on top of the washer and dryer and then piled clothes around him so that if anybody felt on the washer and dryer, they would feel piles of laundry. And he waited. And he waited until 2 or 3 of us were in there whispering, "Have you seen Garrett? Have you seen him?" And then, as quiet as anything, he reaches out his hand and he grabbed his mom on her arm and he goes, "Arr!" like that. Well, she screamed. My sister-in-law was in there too. She screamed. I'm standing by the door. Right, they're both screaming in the utter blackness. I might have screamed. I'm not going to say I did, but I might have. Listen, as soon as you see a scary movie, you realize things get a little creepier, right? When all of a sudden you can't see what's going on and it gets a little freaky. Can you feel it coming up behind? I'm just kidding. In fact, one time when I was a kid, not one time, actually a long time, we lived in a house that had a basement that was not like a finished basement. It was a cellar, right? My mom kept canned foods down there, right? We were farmers. And so my mom would often send me down, "Hey, go get a can of peaches, or a jar of green beans that we did or something." Now, most of the time it was okay because you go to the stairs. Outside the door, there's a light for downstairs. You turn on the light, you open the door, you go downstairs, you get what you need. But on rare occasions, my older brother, Matt, he would see what I was going down to do, and he would sneak up behind me. He would shut the door and lock it, and then he would turn out the light. At this stage of my life, I'd be like, "Stop it." I'd get out my phone. I would walk up the thing, right? But when I was 13, there weren't such things like that. And this is where it got really crazy. My brother, Matt, would do stuff like this. He'd say, you'd feel the light go off. And then he would say, through the door, "Can you hear it?" I'd be like, "Shut up, Matt." "It's creeping up on you." "Stop it. I'm going to tell Mom." "You're scared, aren't you?" "No, shut up." But you know what happened? You know what happened, right? I couldn't help it. I started hearing stuff, right? And I'd be like, "Oh my gosh." And then I would come running up the stairs, banging on the door. He would just laugh and run away. When it's jokes, it's okay, but you guys know that our world right now, you know this, right? You are talking to your friends in the hallway at school. You're probably on some version of social media somewhere that's telling you about how terrible the world is and all the injustices and how polarized the whole world is. And you know that our world is full, absolutely full of confusion and darkness. What's the right way to live? Who's a nice person? How do you do the right kind of thing? Now here's where it gets really complicated. When we meet people who we think are hypocrites. When they say they've got the answers, they've got the light. But the truth is, on the inside, you can tell they're full of darkness. This is infuriating. We find ourselves telling ourselves, "No, this is the right way." And then we look at other people and we're like, "Ugh, they're so bad." Politicians do this, and news media does this, and teachers do it, and students do it, and even in youth groups. And we look at hypocrisy and we're like, oh, yuck. That's the darkest of darkness. Here's the problem. You guys know this. You and I are all a little bit hypocritical. This is true. The older you get, the more you'll realize it's really hard to live out what you say you believe. It really is. My whole life I've said things like, I care about the poor. I have given my whole life, and lots of times I have lived with the poor. I have lived in slums more than once. And there have been times where I just drive past homeless people and don't even notice. When my hypocrisy is pointed out to me, I feel terrible. But at some point, we all are a little bit hypocritical, right? I'm somebody who wants to tell the truth. Have you ever been somebody that says that you value honesty, but then when your friend says, how come you didn't text me back? You do one of those little white lies. You're like, oh, hey, just saw your text. That's hypocritical. Right now, there's this unbelievable thing. You got all these people in Hollywood talking about violent movies or gun violence, and then they make tons of movies about gun violence. And somebody is going like, wait, don't you see what's going on? You say one thing, but then you're living another, but you're talking about one thing, and then this happens, and then this, you say that this is wrong, but then this is how you live. It gets even worse when we find religious hypocrites. But I want to share a text with you from 1 John. This is a big deal. Pardon me, I can't read this small print with my glasses. This is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. Man, I love that. I love the fact that in a world where we find ourselves confused by all kinds of people, confused by all kinds of problems, asking, please God, give us some help. Show us what the right way to live is. We have God. And in God, there is no darkness at all. Now that's important. But watch this. I'm going to skip ahead a bit. The Apostle John is a straight shooter. I like this guy. Listen to what he says. This is chapter 2, verses 7 through 11. And he says, people that I love, I am not writing a new command to you, but an old command which you have had from the very beginning. And the old command is something you've already heard. He says this, on one hand, it's kind of new, which is true in him and you, because the darkness is passing, and the true light is already shining. Listen to what he says. The person who says that they are in the light and yet hates his brother or sister is still in the darkness. The one who loves his brother or sister lives in the light. What Jesus is telling us here, and this really matters, is that here's how you decide if somebody's walking in the light. Right? Because you can say whatever you want to say. I can say whatever I want to say. The way you tell if people are walking in the light is the way that they love the people around them. That's it. So in his gospel, in John, Jesus says, you will know people who are my disciples by the way they love each other. When Jesus says, I'm the light, this is how it works. And he's saying, the way that you can tell people who love me, who follow me, who think I really am the king, who I really am Lord, they are going to love their brothers and sisters around them. That's a great thought. Turns out it's really hard to love your brothers and sisters, isn't it? It's hard to love your friends. I'm really grateful that one of my older brothers, not the one who scared me so bad, one of my other older brothers, I'm the youngest of 4 boys. His name's Chip. He's a therapist and a counselor, and he works in particular with people that have had serious trauma, especially people who had trauma because of a poverty-based lifestyle. As he grew older, he raised his 2 boys. He sent them on their way, and the difficulties of what he saw day after day began to eat at him, and he realized he had to do something. So he began to work with the foster care system. Ended up he fostered several students and several kids, and there were some that did well and some that did not. But in the end, he ended up adopting a little boy named Lucas. And then a few years later, he adopted 2 sisters. And now he's got 5 kids. One of the most profound moments of my whole life is I got to go to the court where the court officially changed the names of these 2 girls to our last name. And in the end, there was the social worker and the lawyer and the people involved, and all the documents were signed. It was incredible how much work it took. But in the end, here's what the judge said. The judge looked at these 2 girls, Haley and Heidi, and said, "Do you want those 2 people to be your mom and dad?" And the girls just nodded and started to cry. And he looked at my brother and his wife, and they said, "Do you want to take full responsibility for them as your family, as your children, for the rest of your life?" They nodded their head. And the judge said, "Why?" And my brother said, "Because I want more than anything for them to be my family." Look, loving people's hard. Treating people like family's hard. Living in the light is tough. Let's make this a little more practical. In your group right now, you know this as well as I do. There's somebody in your group you need to forgive. There is. The relationships you're carrying just this week, I'm not talking about the rest of your life, right? I don't have the power to deal with that. But we can talk about this week. There's somebody in your group that you need to forgive. I'm ashamed of this, but I tend to be a grudge holder. I remember, this is petty. But my high school year, before I was a Christian, we lost the chance to go to the state finals in basketball to a town called Bridgeport. I will literally drive out of my way to avoid going through that town. My wife's like, "Why do we have to go 10 miles out of our way?" Because that town's terrible. She's like, "Why?" I'm like, it smells bad. Right? That was 33 years ago. And I struggle with that. But here, listen, the longer I hold on to pain and debt and not forgiveness, the less light I live in. Some of you today, here's your job. You need to forgive somebody in your group. And here's all that means. You don't have to be like, "Oh, now we're best friends." It means you simply have to cancel the debt that they owe you. You think they need to apologize? Just drop it. You think they need to make up for what they did? Just drop it. Just forgive their debt. Now, you might not be like super close right away, but you need to forgive them for you because you want to walk in the light. There's somebody here where you need to accept them into your group. Now, we all get this. There's always somebody on the outside. You need to be thinking to yourself, who sits alone? My wife is one of my favorite people for lots of reasons. But she actually works as a youth pastor on one of our campuses, as a paid youth pastor. And she has this radar. And I love this about her. It drives me crazy when we go to church because she's like, "Hey, let's go move and sit by them." And I'm like, "Seriously, we just sat down." But she can't help it. But that's one of the things that shows off the Christ in her, is she's looking for the people that need to be brought into the fold. There's somebody that you need to accept. I'll even talk to a couple youth pastors in the room here. There's a couple people that need to be hugged more than others. There's also someone to include. You guys know what this is like. You know what it's like to watch people and then realize that they're having fun and you're over here like this. And you see the good things they're doing and you see the kind of fun they're having. And you're like, "Man, that would be fun." But no. Look, living in the darkness causes hurt and fear. And hurt and fear turns into hatred. And it turns family into fighters. Jesus says people who live in the light love other people. When I was a missionary, one of the things that we used to do is we used to take groups of student leaders out to do expeditions to teach them leadership skills in a different setting. So it's not in a church. We'd go do all kinds of things. We took them mountain climbing and backpacking. And one time we took students caving. Okay, more than once, and we liked it a lot. But when we would take students caving, it was amazing. We'd give them life jackets, and we had professional guides and harnesses. They would clip in. They had to do ropes and swim in an underground river. It was super fun. And so we did that several times. And it was one of those things that you look at your life and you look at your experience and you go, man, what an adventure. But there was one time in particular that it just got out of control, just out of control. We were having a great time. We'd done it several times, and I'd used the same guides time after time. And at the very end of the cave, it was a cave that went all the way through a mountain, and you went in one side, you came out the other. At the very end, there's this huge waterfall going way down, and you can jump off the waterfall into this great big deep pool, and it's fun because everybody's got headlamps, and you can life jacket, you can see it. And so we'd laughed about how much fun that was. And one time the guide says, hey, you want to do something really scary? And I was like, oh yeah, I love brave stuff. And they're like, yeah, let's do something really scary. I go, sure. So we get up on the top of the waterfall, about on this big rock, we're going to jump off. He goes, all right, everybody, listen. Everybody turn off your headlamps. So I'm thinking, all right, this will be a hoot. And I realized my legs wouldn't move. I was like, jump. And my legs were like, no. I'm like, you know what's down there? And my body's like, not doing it. I'm like, listen, everybody, this is the conversation I'm having with myself. My mind is being like, listen, your pride is at stake. And my body's like, how about you shut up? And I'm like, okay, we're jumping. My arms and legs are like, you guys hear anything? I don't hear anything. I'm not jumping. The difficulty that we face in the darkness is that fear overwhelms us. To live in love is to live in light. And it's to spread God's light to those who are still in darkness. And listen, Move, those people might be sitting right next to you. Today is a day to choose to live in love in your relationships. Let me pray for you. Father, I'm grateful for a chance to be a part of Move. I'm grateful for the students that are here. I pray blessing and strength that you would help them love with strength and courage. Amen.